Okay, so when you think of a big tax trial, you're probably picturing spreadsheets, numbers, right? But what if I told you a massive case almost fell apart, not over the money, but over one single piece of paper? Yeah, we're going to dive into how a virtual courtroom got pushed to the very edge over a simple but crucial question: are you even allowed to be here?
And that right there, that's the threat that just stopped everything dead in its tracks. The plaintiffs said it themselves. This wasn't some polite suggestion. It was a straight-up ultimatum. You could feel the tension just crackling, even through a computer screen. It was intense.
So you gotta ask, how on earth does a tax trial get to this point? You know, a formal, legal thing where one side is ready to just pack it up and walk out? Well, that's exactly what we're gonna figure out as we pull back the curtain on this wild courtroom story. All right, first things first. To really get why things got so explosive, we need to know who the players are. And right away, you can see this is a total David versus Goliath situation. You've got one person, a single taxpayer, on one side. And who are they up against? The entire Directorate General of Taxes, the DJP, a massive government agency. So yeah, the scales are tipped from the get-go. And get this wasn't just about one lawsuit. No way. The stakes were through the roof. Why? Because whatever happened in this hearing was going to set a precedent for, wait for it, 59 other related cases. 59! So the pressure on everyone involved? Absolutely immense. Okay, so with that much on the line, you'd think the fight would be over something huge, right? Well, it was. But it all boiled down to one single piece of paper. Let's dig into this one paper debate. So before we even get to the taxes, we have to talk about this really important legal idea called legal standing. Now, the best way to think about it is like the foundation of a house. You can have the most beautiful house in the world, but if that foundation is cracked, the whole thing is coming down. That's what the plaintiff was arguing about. They were pointing at the foundation and asking, hey, is this thing even solid? And here it is, the whole argument in a nutshell. The plaintiff said, show me the surat kuasa, which is basically a formal power of attorney. It's a super specific document coming straight from the top that says, this person can represent us. But what did the government show up with? A surat tugas, which is more like a general letter of assignment from a local office. So for the plaintiff, this wasn't just about paperwork. It was a huge deal. They were looking at the person across the virtual table and thinking, do you even have the right to be in this room?
Of course, the DJP had an answer for this. They weren't just winging it. They were convinced their surat tugas was totally fine. They even pointed to a Supreme Court circular from 2012 to back themselves up. So in their minds, they were just following procedure, business as usual.
So you've got two sides completely dug in, both absolutely sure they're right. After a lot of back and forth, it was all up to the judge to make the call. And folks, this is where it all went sideways. And the ruling comes down. The judge sides with the defendant. He says the surat tugas is good enough, the representation is valid. You'd think, okay, argument over, let's move on. But nope, that decision wasn't the end. It was the fuse being lit.
Wow. That was the plaintiff's reaction, right then and there. An explosion of frustration. You can just feel it, right? They clearly felt like the judge was just picking a side, completely ignoring what they saw as a fundamental flaw in the whole case.
And that was it. They followed through on their threat. Convinced they weren't going to get a fair shake, they refused to go any further and just walked out of the virtual hearing. A pretty dramatic end to that whole procedural fight.
But wait, just when you think it's all over, the story takes a hard left turn. Because it turns out this whole blow-up, it might not have really been about that one piece of paper.
Yeah, get this. The plaintiff leaves, but the judge just keeps the hearing going.
And now, with the other side gone, the defendant finally gets to lay out what's really at stake here. For the very first time, we get to see the real issue hiding behind all that drama, the actual reason for all 59 of those lawsuits.
Okay, so here's the plaintiff's main argument. It's actually pretty straightforward. They're saying there's a hard deadline for tax examinations, and the DJP just blew right past it. They sent out the tax bills after the deadline was up, and because of that, the plaintiff argues the whole thing should be thrown out. Invalid. Done.
Naturally, the DJP had their counter-argument ready. First, they showed their own timeline, trying to prove they did everything by the book. But their big defense was a real legal technicality. They basically said, look, the law is very specific. It says you can only cancel a tax assessment for 2 reasons, and a missed deadline isn't on that list. Pretty tricky, right? All right, let's take a step back and look at what just happened here.
It's pretty clear that there were two completely different fights going on in that one courtroom.
This really is the heart of the matter. On one hand, you had the procedural fight. That was all about the how. Is the paperwork right? Is the foundation solid? A huge battle over one single document. But then, simmering underneath all that was the substantive fight. The what? Is the tax bill even right in the first place? And that's a whole different battle, all about deadlines and the nitty-gritty of the regulations.
And that leaves us with this big lingering question, doesn't it? This whole situation really makes you think, how far do you follow the rules of the game before you lose sight of what's actually fair? Is there a danger that by focusing so much on how things are done, we forget to ask if the outcome is actually right? That's the puzzle at the very center of this whole story.